Oh, we're live. Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Mykiah Bonhom. I am the esports specialist at Spectrum Industries, and I am also a member of the Esports Trade Association's Education Committee. And today we present the LinkedIn Live on how to build an esports arena. And I am joined by my two wonderful guests, Danielle Rourke and Nik Turner. Would you guys give me the pleasure of introducing yourselves?
Yeah,
Danielle,
absolutely.
you first, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I am Danielle Rourke. I'm the National Esports Manager at Tech Reseller CDW, and I have the privilege to lead a team of two esports consultants, Josh Weatherholt and Jen Dawson, who all of us have worked with Mykiah on various events and excursions, and we really appreciate the partnership. And obviously the Esports Trade Association is the best place to go to get information and contacts from other people, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, and I'm Nik Turner, and I am the co-chair of the Education Committee. But tonight it's nice for you to host for me, so I can just be here from an industry perspective. I'm the owner of NT Esports, which is an esports and education consultancy firm, and I'm also an account manager for Yo-Yo Tech, which are the UK's leading provider of esports arenas and solutions and classrooms here in the UK. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, awesome. I guess I should give a little bit more background with me. My journey in esports started in college, where I actually studied esports as my degree. So, like, my degree says Bachelor of Science in Esports Management. I'm very passionate about what I do. And throughout my various internships and going to places like Los Angeles, Miami, London, and South Korea, I've gained quite in a mass amount of experience that even I'm surprised with sometimes. And it all eventually led to me being where I am today. So I'm very excited. And I use my experience to go and talk to people about why esports is important, why they should start an esports program, and, well, obviously getting them to buy some furniture along the way. It's great. So I guess we can go ahead and we'll segue into the first question. So the first question is, can you explain what esports and education looks like from your perspective? And we'll start with Nik, since Danielle started off the introductions.
Okay, so it's kind of been a bit of a revolution here in the UK in the last sort of 5 years. Prior to that, we had a few universities running degrees in esports, but they were very focused, very specific. And what happened was we introduced a national qualification called the BTEC in esports, and that was launched about 4 years ago. And it started out with kind of 20, I think it was 24 colleges in the first year because it was only announced quite late. We've now got nearly 200 colleges running esports qualifications for 16 to 18-year-olds. We've had 15,000 esports students have gone through that process. And as a result, it's created a wave of activity both above and below that 16 to 18 college age group. So we now have more and more universities that have written degrees because they can see that there's the marketplace for these 15,000 students who've studied esports for 2 years. Where do they go? Well, they can come to us, and pay for their degree. So that's already kind of like working its way through. So the next phase, if you like, or the new trend is that it's going downwards into schools, which is really encouraging because it's kind of just starting to introduce esports and gaming, but in an educational way, for much younger audiences. So hopefully, it won't be long before we'll have a full progression from kind of 10 through to 21. And I think it's interesting because before the BTEC, I was working at an esports organization setting up their education academy, like an internal thing. And we were looking at the States for, where you were at, and you kind of like, you had your scholarships for your players. And in that regard, you are way ahead of where we are at the UK, where we're still playing catch up on that front. Whereas I would say in terms of the formal qualifications that we offer, we're kind of like leading in that, in that, formal certified qualifications and certificates. So I think there's clear differences between here and the States and other countries, but it's it's a massive area and a massive growth area here in the UK for esports and education, and I can only really see it going one way, because it has all those wonderful things that you can engage students. It's a vehicle for transferable skills. You know, it's a vehicle for learning a whole range of different things. But that vehicle happens to be something that the younger generation are into, engaged with. You know, they want to attend, and so it kind of like makes it easier for as educators. And a big part of that, as I'm sure you'll agree, Danielle, is the environment that takes place in. You know, and that's just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree with everything that Nik said, and then do a yes and for those drama students who are with us. Esports in the United States in education has been around for at least a decade or more, and there were really a lot of colleges that kind of jumped on board first. We've seen the collegiate space grow the fastest, grow the most, and have the most longstanding programs, probably just due to the fact that there's a little bit more disposable income sometimes on the high ed side of things, as well as the fact that higher education and colleges and universities are all looking at how can we pull in the recruitment of new students, the retention of students that we already have, and identifying something as massive as video gaming and then adding in the competition aspect. That was an easy win for these colleges and universities. We're here to talk about building an esports arena, building an esports space, a classroom, an arena, whether it's for college or K-12, is oftentimes much cheaper than building a baseball field or building an American football field or any of those things. A lot of the times we do get pushback in the industry from some educational institutions that say, oh, we don't have the budget for that, it's too expensive, etc. But when you actually sit them down and have some of those conversations around, okay, how much are you spending per year on jerseys and on uniforms and on balls and on court rental fees and things like that, they start to see that, okay, investing in this dedicated space where students can come and be a part of something that they're already so passionate about, but then can also be tied to educational outcomes like Nik was talking about. It's something that most colleges and universities really latched onto and said, okay, we can figure out how to make this work. In the US, it definitely then kind of trickled down to K-12 school districts. They saw what the colleges were doing. They started, the few schools that maybe had programs years and years ago started getting calls from these colleges and college recruiters saying, hey, we want your students. We saw them playing on this match. We want them to come join our team. And so I think that was really a light bulb moment for the younger grades here in the United States saying, oh, this is more than just a community building activity. This is something that can actually get them scholarships and can help them on their educational career.
Yeah, it's honestly amazing. As someone who has gone through an esports program, when I was in high school, I didn't really expect to be able to study esports or anything like that. I actually thought I was going to do a psychology degree, but then I realized I don't want to go to med school, so that's not happening. So it was just awesome to be able to find a degree program that I felt very passionate about and made me feel like I could go and work in an industry where I can wake up and say that I love what I do, and I can say that, so I'm very happy. So yeah, I guess that leads into our next question. For someone who is looking to start an esports program at their school, community college, like whatever equivalent that would be, how would you explain to them to go about convincing their administrators that esports is something they should bring to their school?
Yeah, Nik, I'm going to let you take it first because I'm trying to fix my camera. So
Okay. So it's one of those, for me personally, I'm quite fortunate in that I've been able to experience it from the beginning in the UK, and therefore I've got so many anecdotal points and evidence to kind of like indicate and demonstrate how things work. And probably the best way to put it would be, I was head of esports at a college in the UK, which was the first college to have an esports arena. And we actually had 2 esports arena in an amazing facility. So everybody was watching us. Everybody was kind of like, I can't believe they've got this facility at their college. We appreciated how lucky we were. But through that journey from starting in the first year of the BTEC qualification, it also meant that we were the ones that had all of the problems. We were the ones that experienced all of the hiccups along the way. But just for example, you know, when you're talking to senior management, there's a few things that they have concerns about, especially in terms of any capital investment that they might need for their esports facility. And I'd say 2 things, and one of them kind of comes off the back of what Danielle said, in that we encourage all of our centres to monetize their space. You know, in the same way that 30 years ago, lots of schools and colleges and universities were putting in AstroTurf pitches, so that they would rent them out in the evening for local football teams, local hockey teams to use. It's exactly the same model for an esports arena. So you can instantly give a monetary kind of return in those initial conversations. And for example, we used to rent out on a Saturday one of our arenas for birthday parties, and those birthday parties, you know, depending on the day itself, was usually have like maybe 4 or 5, and we would generate somewhere in the region of £1,000 to £1,500 on a Saturday. Now, if you think about that across the year, you quickly make up the investment that you've put in. The second most important thing in terms of why you should install a facility at your centre is the experience for the students. In terms of engagement, in terms of recruitment, you know, we went from year 1, before we had the arena built, because it was being built in year 1, we had 17 students that started that very first year in the qualification. Then we had the arenas built, and we publicised it, and we had lots of open evenings. It was the busiest block for open evenings, to the point whereby the principal did the talks every hour, and we had to do a talk separately every half hour because we were so full and we didn't want to detract from the principal's talk. And then we went, in terms of recruitment, from 17 to 72 to 124 to 178 in 3 years. Now, if you think all of those students are funded to be at the college, and you've added 178 students, revenue-wise, you know, in the UK, that's a lot of, you know, it's over £1 million. So senior management are often very comfortable with that side of things, less comfortable with the idea of esports, maybe. So it is down to you to convince them, but there's, you know, there are lots of different ways that you can show that and demonstrate that. And, you know, again, I always use an example that we had one student who lived about 50 miles away from the college, and he used to get up at 6 and get on a train at 6:15 and do like an hour and a quarter on the train, and then a half an hour on the bus for 2 changes to get to college for 9. This is a 16-year-old, to get to college for 9 o'clock, and he was there nearly every day. You know, and when I did the interviews, and I looked at the address, and I thought, that can't be right. And so I looked at Mum and said, "Says you live here." "Yep, we've done the practice route. I have to go to work at 6, so I'm going to drop him off every morning at this." You know, and for 2 years he did that. And like, I think you'd struggle to find many students in studying other things that would have that level of commitment.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't do that.
But you're absolutely right, Nik. Like, you know, you see so much passion from these students, and most of the time that's what will win over, at least here in the US too, that's what will win over the administrators. I often tell administrators that I'm speaking with, you know, or tech leaders or teachers even, just go to one of the events live, and you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the excitement. You're going to see the passion and the drive on those students' faces. You're going to see the spectators going crazy, just like they do for traditional sports games. And, another thing that we talk about a lot when we're giving presentations or speaking with administrators is the fact that you're really building up that affiliation with the school, because there are so many of these students who are into gaming or into esports and want to be a part of this, but they're not band kids, they're not theater kids, they're not in debate. If this, what I shocking. Those of you that know me know that I'm 5'3", and I tried out for the basketball team when I was in junior high and did not make it, shockingly enough. But, esports would have been something that could have tied me to that school spirit and helped me feel like I'm really a part of this community and this educational organization. It's so enlightening when you go and you see in person one of these competitions happening. So that's usually always my big ticket to convince them, is like, have you been to one live? No, let's go.
Yeah. We
And
used a lot of, oh, sorry.
no, carry on.
No, I was just gonna say we did that a lot at Shenandoah. Like we would have a lot of like recruiting fairs, and we would have just different events, and the events would always be open to public. And I will always have vivid memories of parents of incoming students, or parents of, or just people in the area of Shenandoah just coming in and being like, I heard you all were hosting a Rocket League tournament. Like I just wanted to come and see. And thankfully Rocket League is very easy to understand, but like when they go in and they see, students out there playing and like high-fiving each other, hugging each other after like a good score, or they see like their classmates cheering each other on, you don't have to fully understand what is happening in the game to understand the effect that it is having on students. And I feel like any person who sees that connection really is just can see the value that esports can bring to a program.
And I think kind of like off the back of that, in terms of the sports side of it, and the links between traditional sports and esports that we all understand and everybody involved understands. I think the BTEC qualification that was written here 5 years ago was very much had that in mind when it was built, but it's taken a little while for the sports side of it, from the sports teacher side of it, to work out that it's a valuable mechanic and a vehicle to deliver those things. And we installed an arena at a private school, and they had no intention of using the arena for curriculum. It was purely for enrichment, extracurricular activity, competition. But most interesting for me was when we were speaking to the head of sport there, and he explained. He said, "Look, I've got," because they had amazing facilities. They had cricket pitches, rugby pitches, football, soccer pitches, golf course. So they weren't short of those traditional kind of facilities. And he said, "But I've got probably 20-25% of my cohort that they don't want to play traditional sports. I can't get them to come out onto the playing fields and play. They don't, they just don't engage." And those 25% nearly all engage in esports, as well as the ones who overlap. And the sports teacher kind of said to me, he said, like, so I looked into esports and worked out and started to watch it, and worked out that actually I can use esports and deliver my sports curriculum through esports. All of the transferable skills that we need to teach them, and leadership, strategy, performance analysis, communication, teamwork, all of those things, I can do that through esports. And suddenly I can engage the 25% of students who weren't engaged. But to hear a sports, because we just took for granted that sports teachers would get that. But to hear somebody say it, straight off the bat, and, that was one of the reasons for getting the arena, was, really encouraging. And again, that's another thing that we talk about, in the same way as kind of like, some people who might have, social communication issues or social awkwardness, and, and those kind of like learners, the benefits to them in that environment, are incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm gonna say I don't want to stay on this question too long, but I will just say that especially at my program at Shenandoah, there were a lot of people who esports was the only thing that they did on campus. Like not even just
Mhm.
like if it wasn't for esports, they probably wouldn't have even showed up to class. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, yeah, so yeah. Now we'll move on to the next question. I'm actually gonna skip a question on this list because I feel like we already kind of answered it a little bit. So next, I'm going to ask, what are the most significant challenges faced when designing or constructing an esports facility?
I'll jump in with a couple if that's okay. And I'm gonna actually share a slide that I got from Spectrum Industries, Mykiah.
Oh
So
my
I think
gosh.
I think our friend Scott Dorn was the person who introduced me to this. But it's one of the reasons that I love Spectrum Industries so much is because many times there's so much to think about when you're building a space. Do we have gaming chairs? Do we have desks? Do we have a shoutcasting station? Do we have the right components and the right peripherals? Do we have licenses for all the games? So there are a lot of different components to think about. But unfortunately, I think one of the things that it gets overlooked sometimes are those accessibility requirements. And here, Nik, I'd love for you to talk about what it is in the UK, but
Yeah.
in the United States, like there are some very specific requirements and guidelines for places, public places where students are going to be congregating. And so that's why I bring this slide up. I absolutely love it because it reminds the esports director or the coordinator or the administrator at the school, like, oh, yeah, we need to make sure that this is accessible for everyone. Because I don't know about you, Nik and Mykiah, like, but that's one of the things that I love the most about esports is the fact that
Yeah.
you don't have to be the tallest kid, you don't have to be the strongest kid, you don't have to be, a certain physical attribute in order to be really good at competing in esports and to be a part of that team. And so, by making sure when you're building out a space, when you're thinking about a space, consider ramps, consider how high you have things mounted, consider are the tables an appropriate height to get a wheelchair under, or is there an availability to raise and lower those desks? Also, other things such as screen protectors, or for students who may have either eye sensitivities, color blindness, things like that. There are so many great offerings out there now, not only from Spectrum, but also from places like Xbox, with the accessibility controller. So if you have students who may have physical limitations or challenges, they can also play right along with the other students who are playing on a normal Xbox controller. So that's one of the things, and thank you for letting me share that slide, Mykiah. That's one of the things that I think is so important to think about, but sometimes unfortunately gets overlooked.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. So last week I was at the Bet Global exhibition in London, and the week before that I was in Plymouth on an install for an arena, and what we've designed at Yo-Yo Tech is a rising version of one of these desks. So it's slightly different to this one, but the model's the same. So you have the rows and the banks, so that it's all symmetrical, and then where should we put this desk, and in terms of access from the door. But it was the first one we installed 2 weeks ago, and where that LED light is, it rises. You could use it as a standing desk if you wanted to. It's slightly wider, with enough space for a wheelchair. Although, our standard design has enough space for a wheelchair, and again, like what we've learned over the last 4 years is the need to evolve and adapt and kind of like learn. These in the UK, they didn't really exist. So we've learned over time about exactly those kind of like problems that you face, like the LED lights. A lot of the time, the LED lights can be way too bright. So everything that we install that has the LED lights are always controllable with a remote, so that you can dim them, use them for different things, or just have them turned off. So I think kind of like as producers of those solutions, It's our responsibility to make sure that it's accessible for everybody. I mean, I think probably one of the other like hurdles, if you like, that we come across most is simply space. Because a lot of education centres, their initial investment, despite the fact that we encourage them not to do this, they always say, right, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a small arena and we're going to have like 6 seats. And then we've got a room next door, which we can look at expanding. And then we sort of said, that's great, but it's going to cost you twice as much as if you just went for the big one first off. And those spaces are often small. So you've then got the kind of like the restrictions of how do we fit the number of units, the number of stations that they want in to that space. We need to make sure that the desks are wide enough for competing so that students aren't breaking bones in their hand because they're coming up and hitting the side panel. There's so many different things, like where do we put the PC? Where do we want to put the PC? Do we want it locked in at the top? Do we want it sat at the bottom? And we'll work with the customer to provide whatever it is they want, because you've got advantages and disadvantages of both. Like if it's under the desk in a little thing, you might kick it, you could spill spill juice on it. And when you've got students constantly all day going through using the arena, accidents do happen. So you need to make it as bulletproof as possible, if you like. And the other one is kind of like simple things like power and data. And people don't necessarily appreciate what's required. As I said earlier, we had the first arena. It always makes me laugh. We had the first arena in the UK in a college, and we had 2. And then the first student championships afternoon, we had both arenas. So there was 50 plus machines all in action with teams competing against other colleges. And we just brought the whole college to a standstill.
It probably sounded like a wind tunnel in there, Nik.
Yeah, we were having a whale of a time in the arenas until IT came running in, wondering why teachers couldn't open a Word document. So that was very quickly, right, okay, we need to think about networks and switches and all those things. So we constantly learn.
Yeah, for me, I would say that the biggest challenge I've seen, at least in my little time being in the professional side, is really just, I guess, just inaction, I guess, from the perspective of a lot of times I always explain it as esports programs grow exponentially. It's very, very hard to get started, like yeah, I just saw recently, well, because I was there, but Syracuse, like they're growing up their esports program, and they're spending a lot of money, and their esports arena looks very, very nice. I wish I had that. I at least had their professor, so that's good. But they're very lucky to have that, but not a lot of people start their esports programs like that. A lot of people, it starts off with just either like just a Switch, or maybe just like a couple of PCs, not even PCs, just their Chromebooks playing Minecraft or something like that. It starts, I always say getting started is the most important thing, because once you start, things kind of just fall into place. I've seen it so many times where people, professors or teachers will come up to me and be like, hey, like I have no idea, I don't even really play video games, like I play Candy Crush on my phone, that's about as much gaming as I do, but like I see how much impact it has on my students, so I'm just there to help, and that's all you really need to be. And so to me, that's always like one of the easiest, but like one of the biggest challenges that I've always seen, of just just convincing people that like, hey, something is better than nothing. Oh, speaking of jet engines.
I know, sorry, my Roomba wanted to make an appearance on this particular call.
Oh man. All right. So now we'll go on to the next question. So how does someone maintain engagement in their arena with their students?
I think that is thoughtful design. When you're building out an esports space, we have so many different customers that we work with that maybe, they couldn't get funding to just do a purely esports space build out. But as long as they're tying it to career and technical education programs or STEM programs, they can. So they need to be able to multi-purpose those spaces together. I actually have a slide, if we can pull that one up, for Apollo Junior High in Texas. They're one of my favorite examples as far as multi-purposing a space, because during the day it is one of those STEM technology classrooms that students come to learn typing and to learn Word, and maybe even go so far as CAD classes and things like that. But in the afternoons it gets turned into the esports space. And so when they were putting this room together, they were very thoughtful about, all right, let's make it in pods. You can kind of see in some of these pictures, the desks are in pods, the chairs are in pods. Spectrum Industries furniture, by the way. You're welcome, Mykiah. But uh, but they were very thoughtful about where screens were, where the students would be located, so that it could be useful if you were teaching a class and maybe the students needed to work on projects together, or they needed to be able to see the screen or the whiteboard or et cetera while the teacher was lecturing or giving information. But it also facilitated gameplay. It also left enough space around the different pods so that, if spectators wanted to kind of stand behind their favorite team as they were playing, or coaches wanted to be behind them as they were scrimmaging, that was something that was accessible. Also, having kind of that spectating area in there, it doesn't showcase really well on these particular pictures, but making sure that you have that soft seating or extra chairs so people can observe and watch. That's good in both an esports build out, as well as just a classroom build out where you may want to move the furniture around. Having the furniture on wheels so that you can reposition it for different purposes and different classes throughout the day. All of those, I think, are really important to making sure that you can utilize the space for multiple purposes, whether there's an esports event going on there or not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we kind of we install so many different sort of types of spaces in schools and colleges. And it's important that they're multi-purpose. So, for example, this one here, there's actually a full sliding door that comes across to partition those two spaces, so that you have two separate spaces. And then when they have their events in the evening, it opens up, and then you can fit them all in. They've got PlayStations. There's a couple of Sims, and also like that big kind of big TV on the wall so that spectators can watch. In the cupboards, they've got their soft furnishing, which they bring out, which you don't really want that in the middle of a classroom, because the students will just go and sit on that instead of studying. But also, where we can, those high racked stations that you can see against the walls there, if you think about those in the middle of a standard teaching classroom, potentially that's an obstacle for teachers, because students can hide, and there's obviously software so that you can see, what they're doing, but nevertheless, they can be doing anything if you're the wrong side. So that's where your design comes in, and where the teacher is and where their station is, so that you can make sure that they've got eyes on everybody. Or you produce a different design, which is not the top, not those high-rise ones, and a much lower one where the PC sits sort of like more on the desktop. And that way you can have a clear vision. It's also important that, when we're talking to these centers in the first place, to say, look, these PCs are of a spec that will enable you to do media production, music, CAD drawing, all, kind of like those high-powered PCs. They're not just for esports. And again, that's often a seller, other than the fact that the esports teachers say, no, you can't come in. This is our space. We're the ones with the LEDs. So yeah, I think it's kind of like a versatility, and they can be moved. We set up a lot of arenas whereby we have tournament desks. Now, the tournament desks are great for tournaments and great for events, but they're not necessarily that, practical for lots of other things. So they can just wheel them out, store them, hide them away, and then when they're needed, you can bring them back in. So yeah, you know, I think kind of, you know, we think on the same lines as to what Danielle says. And it's kind of like about adaptability, flexibility, and practicality.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, I just don't really have too much to add. I wish I did. I mean, I guess
You took Mykiah's like words away, Nik. That's shocking.
no, I mean, it's just I guess I could go a little bit like from the, I guess just coming back from the student perspective. For me, I always say, you know, for me, the thing that I love so much about Shenandoah wasn't just that, well, I didn't compete on any teams because I'm bad, but like it wasn't necessarily about like the competition, and it wasn't really about like the being able to take esports classes. I always say that community is the number one thing that people should be focusing on. Community build helps you build a solid foundation, because you know, we live in an age where a lot of students like myself, like you can go and some students bring their PCs to school with them, and you know, they can go and play in their rooms by themselves alone, probably in the dark. So how do you bring them out of their rooms, coming in and engaging with one another? And sometimes I think it's things of focusing a little bit more outside of like the competition aspect of it. You know, for example, we had like a Killer Queen arcade system in our arena, and we would just go and we would play Killer Queen against each other. We had like an area in the middle where students could sit down, write, study, eat food, get Joey and the administrators mad at us because we leave food on the table. Like those are the things that really, in my mind, help bring your students there and help keep them there. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's students like me where not every student wants to necessarily compete, or not every student wants to, you know, maybe they're not even really interested in pursuing esports as a career or anything like that. But, you know, just coming in and being able to come to a community where like, hey, you know, I can meet other people who play video games. I can meet other people who watch anime. I can meet other people who are into the things that I am into on my campus and very easily accessible. So to me, that's like one of my main thing that I always go for when focusing on engagement as far as students, because they meant so much to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there we go. All right. So we'll move on to the next question. This is I'll leave this a little bit more specific for you, Nik. So you answered this a little bit earlier, but kind of wanted to go a little bit more in depth. So has the UK embraced esports in education? And have you seen any noticeable differences in esports growth over there versus in the United States, either from this competition or not competition, either from this conversation that we're having right now, or just in general?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and I think the comparison part of that question is quite tricky because I think we're running almost different models, and the way that they've developed has been very different. But in terms of has education embraced? No, yes, has it embraced esports in the UK? 100%. I think what happened was because we get to see it from kind of like, although I was on the inside as a teacher and as head of department when it first started, you know, for the last few years, I can certainly see it from the outside. And there was an initial take up, you know, the early adopters just understood, just got it and went, yeah, we are running with this because I can see the potential. You had the other ones who weren't so sure and were kind of, what? No, this isn't, I don't think this is a thing. And they sat on the sidelines and watched and saw what happened. And what happened was that in most cases, their rivals or somebody within their patch had adopted it and had suddenly taken a lot of their students away from them because they, no, well, I'm going to go and do esports at that college instead of going and do, you know, whatever at that college. So there was a kind of like a hiatus for a couple of years whereby it was quite quiet from a certain group. And then after 2 years, they then came into the picture. So we kind of like had a second wave of people wanting facilities because they were just like waiting to see how it panned out and if it was going to be popular. And, you know, probably because of a lack of understanding, you know, and organisations like British Esports, Esports Scotland, Esports Wales, you know, did a really good job of explaining to politicians, to government, to education institutions, to parents, you know, why this is a thing, what are the benefits of this, this is how it works, this is, you know, and busting those myths about they're just going to come in and play games. And I think kind of like through doing that, we've established a trust in, you know, that enables us to progress and develop esports. Whereas when I first started looking at education in esports about 10 years ago now, convincing parents was like the hardest thing to do. And if you're not convincing the parents, then education isn't going to jump on board, because if they've got parents at home saying my son and my daughter, they're not doing esports, you know, they're not doing gaming, you know, then you're going to really struggle. Whereas like that whole perception has changed, and now when we're talking to parents and that, they kind of sit there and go, oh yeah, well I know about this and I know about that, and it's really refreshing that you don't have to battle against it. So you know, in the same way that since the qualification at college came out and all the universities have now grasped it and gone, right, we need to start writing and providing facilities, it is definitely, we have embraced esports in education for sure here in the UK.
So, just a follow-up question that I just thought about. So, is it more focused like across, like as far as the government level, is there government support like at the local level? Like, I'm not gonna pretend like I know how the UK
Yeah,
government is structured or anything, but
yeah,
like in the States here, you know, a lot of esports is funded by local teacher or teacher nonprofits or just local state organizations and things like that. There really isn't like a national level
yeah,
push for esports or anything like
yeah.
that. So I was wondering if it was similar over there.
No, so the situation that we're in that's different to the States is that in the UK, esports still isn't considered a sport. It's a game, and that affects so many different elements, and the main one being funding streams. So whereas traditional sports get funding from, you know, the national lottery and the government and a whole range of different, like Sport England, and esports doesn't, because it's not recognized as a sport. So for, you know, it's another thing that the governing bodies in the UK are trying to work on and build on, is to get it reclassified as a sport. And I was speaking to the CEO at Esports Wales last week, and you know, he was fairly confident that this year, I think he said, I'm sure he said this year, you know, that will change, and that literally is a game changer. You know, that will change funding. At the moment, it's very much private investment. A lot of tech companies, you know, it's a good way for them to get involved in esports on at the, I don't mean this nastily, but the lower end of the market in terms of, you know, it's cheaper to enter esports within education than it is to enter professional esports. You know, if you're looking to get into the industry. So, yeah, it's just constantly changing. You know, and education has really kind of like helped, is developing that change all the time.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, so now we'll move on to the question that I have for Danielle. So, Danielle, for you, as a woman who has been in esports and self-proclaimed from you, been in nerdy culture for pretty much your whole life, I wanted to ask you, what kind of community does esports bring together?
The best kind. So okay, now that I've gotten that out of the way, you know, esports brings together a ton of different types of communities. Mykiah, you talked about it too, as far as, you know, people who not only like to play the esports games, but also just like gaming in general, like gaming culture, like tabletop gaming, like anime. Oftentimes you're going to see all of those different students kind of congregate in the spaces that you've built for esports. And I'm gonna rip off Scott Dorn's slides again here, if you don't mind, Mykiah,
Always,
since
always stealing, always
I
stealing.
know, we're gonna steal Scott Dorn's slides, but you know, I wanted to talk just in, especially in light of esports arenas and esports spaces for today's topic. You know, there are a lot of different communities, even within the gaming community and the esports community, that meet depending on how you build out your space. So, for example, here, you can see Carthage Esports was very heavy on PC and desktop gaming. So that's going to be like your League of Legends players and ones that want to do more of the Windows based PC type involvement. Sometimes when you build out arenas, you're going to have varsities or competition stages in the spaces as well, if you can afford it. And that brings in the people that like watching competition. Like, whether they're into esports, whether they're into gaming or not, you're going to have parents, you're going to have teachers, you're going to have fans that just want to support their school or want to support the team or their students who are playing. And so that you're going to bring in and build more of a community out of. Console gaming is incredibly important. That's something that we talk about all the time, because there are a lot of students who maybe have never had access to high-end computer gaming machines before. But there are a lot more students who have probably had access to an Xbox or to a PlayStation or to a Nintendo Switch. And so if you have a space within your arena dedicated to console gaming, you're going to much more easily bring in that community of gamers. And then they may, start to dabble in PC gaming and, get addicted to that, not in a bad way, in a good way. But there are a lot of different ways that you can bring in those different types of communities, bringing in teachers, bringing in shoutcasters, or students maybe who are interested in journalism or media. Newspapers aren't quite as popular as they used to be back in the day. And so you still have those colleges within universities that are focused on media, communication, journalism. How do you educate those students to be able to do that in a way for the modern era? And esports and shoutcasting and podcasting labs, they can all do that. So those are just a few of the examples that I wanted to share of, like, where Spectrum Industries, especially too, has created these spaces for the students, for the educational institutions to gather in those different types of community.
And that kind of that competition culture and the viewing, the spectatorship, that is something that definitely here in the UK is only really taken off, I would say, in the last year. So to start with, those facilities were very much classroom based, teaching spaces, but spaces where you could game and do enrichment. And the example on the screen there from which is at a college university, so they do from 16 to 21. And this space, they spent a considerable amount of money. They've got 4 different rooms, and this is just one of them. And this was their performing arts theatre. So what you can't see behind these chairs is a whole row of stacked seats that are removable. They built this, it's about 30-foot LED screen behind so that they could show the tournaments. And all of those tournament desks, you can probably make out a modular. They're on wheels. So they take that away and put that in the side cupboard when need be, so they can still use it for performing arts, media production. And the LED screen in the computer goes up to a gallery at the other end, so that it's 100% TV broadcast quality, vision, mixing, gallery, digital skills. So when you've got your esports competition going on, you've got your media students manning the gallery if the esports students aren't doing that as well. And there's just scope for so many different things that they can use, in spaces like these, that this is something, we've more and more universities are looking for the competition space, because they work out that when you put these competitions on, students want to watch, and you fill out the, they're going out into the corridors. So, that's exciting, because like I said earlier, from the competitive side, I'd say we're slightly behind the States, but we're doing our best to catch up.
I was going to say, you won't be for long.
Yeah,
you won't be
say,
for long.
You
for
won't be
sure.
for long. Yeah, definitely. I'm about to say it's definitely like changing, and things are ever evolving. And like even with us, like we invest in esports so much and everything like that. But like you look at games like League of Legends or like Dota or something, I'm sure like a middle school team in like South Korea could probably wipe the floor with any of our varsity teams. Like it's just the culture that she said. So it's very interesting. All right. So I see we have about like 10 minutes left, so I'll try to get through these questions a little quicker. So for this one, I wanted to ask, so how has the design of esports arenas evolved in recent years, and what are some trends that you see that are emerging?
Danielle, you kick us off with that one.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. So as far as evolving, we talked a little bit earlier about how typically we only saw dedicated spaces, a few years ago, we only saw dedicated spaces in the high ed arena. Now we're starting to see those dedicated spaces pop up all over the country in K-12 areas more and more, especially as the benefits and as administrators see the amazingness that it offers to students. When we're talking about build outs of spaces, I would definitely see we've noticed a couple of additions in the past probably year and a half. And I think that they're only going to keep going and keep accelerating in the space. One of those is sim racing. So whether you have, car racing rigs that are set up, there's some great ones from Placey, from Fnatic. They're really cool. If anybody wants to go look at some examples, Syracuse has a really great setup for their sim racing as well. But that is definitely becoming much more of a focus. And I think that there's a draw because similar to what you were saying with Rocket League, Mykiah, earlier, like it's easy to understand. Like it's easy for people who maybe haven't been in the space before to say, oh, okay, you're going to sit down and you're going to drive a race car. Like I get that. I understand that. I could try that. So I think we're seeing now that we have these spaces established, bringing in equipment like that can just draw in more and more members of the community is definitely taking off. To a little bit of a lesser extent, we've seen flight simulators, although depending on the type of educational institution that you're going to, flight simulators might be a bigger draw than racing car simulators. But we're also starting to see AR and VR and just the whole XR gamut of devices. So you're seeing different colleges and universities have Beat Saber competition teams. You're seeing, a few different things. Hado is starting to grow, definitely here in the US. I know that there are some English and Scottish teams, I believe, that are competing in Hado. So for those on the webinar who may not know what Hado is, it's essentially like dodgeball, but you're wearing VR goggles of some kind and you're going through the software, and the competition is throwing energy balls at people. So there's no physical balls happening, but it's energy shields, and they're still using their physical bodies to run back and forth across the court. So it does take a little bit more space, which is why I don't think we've seen, at least in the US, Hado pick up quite as quickly as I think it could. The benefits are all there, and it fights against that argument of esports being a sedentary sport, but it does take a little bit of an investment from the school to have that much of a space and then to get the headsets coming in. And then we're also seeing mobile gaming. So mobile gaming units, the Switch has been a standby for forever, but much like we were talking about earlier, space is a concern, whether you're at a K-12 school district or whether you're at a high ed institution. And so they may have run out of space. They may have all of the devices, all of the desks that they can have in the dedicated space that they do have, but they have more and more students that are interested. So we're starting to see interest in things like the Lenovo Legion Go, the MSI Claw, the Asus ROG Ally, where they are handheld, mobile-friendly devices that are running Windows operating systems so that they can be transported, they can be stored in a much smaller footprint, but still allow those students to participate and to play. So, Nik, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, it's almost a mirror to what you've just said, which I find really kind of fascinating and interesting. At Hado, we had that came in. We had like a portable version came into our college to demo it. And obviously when you see it live, it's one thing, but then when you're watching it through your device and you can see all of the stuff, and it's like that perfect blend between traditional sports and esports, because you've got the physical, but you've got the electronic, and like you say, that investment in the space to make it work, is a fair investment, but you can also then like use those sort of portable studios that Haddo take around with them. And the other thing is the sim racing. In the first 2 years of Yo-Yo Tech installing facilities, I don't think we put a single sim rig in any space. Now it's rarer that we don't, and we'll often set up an arena or a classroom, and then in the room next door will be a sim room where we might have 2, 4, 6 sim rigs. And I'm in Guild Esports HQ today, and I was having a look around earlier. Sims everywhere. There are rooms and rooms full of sims, and some of those that they rent out. Excuse me. And we did an install at a games publishing company, who wanted a space for no reason. They just wanted an esports space where people could play. And the sim rig is it's so accessible. We were at the Bet exhibition last week, and we had a sim rig set up on our stand for everybody to use. And if you've got, as long as you understand a steering wheel, a brake, and an accelerator, you can just hop in the chair and try it. And it's a spectator. It's good to watch, but also they've now brought that into the student championships British esports have, so that students are competing nationally against each other in the sim racing. But I mean, last week at the show, these very young, well, I say very young, like youngsters considered, unbelievable. Just hopped in. We're like doing the fastest lap, and you're like, they've never driven a car, and they hop in like it's just, they're in tune straight away. So yeah, very similar there. And I won't go on for ages because I know we need to wrap things up.
Real quick, Mykiah, if you don't mind, Nik, have you guys seen? I know over here in the States, the Gran Turismo movie was a pretty big hit, and especially among like the esports community, because it was really lending like that validity. Like, look, this was a true story about this kid who was really good at sim racing and got invited to become an actual racer. So was it popular in the UK?
Yeah, it is, and it's like it's even one of those ones that I got my wife to watch, and she kind of like got it and understood it, and yeah, it's a great kind of film to demonstrate those possibilities. And there's also a really good series from Fnatic, where they sent their sim racers out to BMW in Germany, and raced against them in real cars and on sims. I won't tell you what happens. I'll let you go and watch it, but it's very interesting to see how the sim racers got on.
Yeah, and I'll just end it off with one thing that I have found that has been very interesting, and I hope continues to develop, is seeing the professional side of esports start to like work with and come with the educational side. And the biggest example I could bring up is Gen G, and specifically with what they're doing with Syracuse. Eugenia, love Eugenia, she's awesome. Seeing that, honestly, for me, is something that hits very at home, because when I was studying esports and learning about it, it was kind of just like, why aren't the two sides working together? Like, it seems like both sides can learn a lot from each other. I mean, you think of college football and the NFL, like it's literally a direct pathway. And I'm not saying I don't know what it's going to look like, because obviously it's not the same, but seeing it of like a lot of esports students could come and bring great ideas of how esports can grow, bring ideas of like how these esports companies can engage with them and engage like and market to them, or whatever it could possibly be. That is something that I am very excited to see develop. I hope that I continue to see develop. I know Gen G is not the only person. I know Optic does some things with schools in Texas as well. But yeah, that's just something for me personally that I hope we continue to see a trend. So yeah, well, oh man, I feel bad because like I don't want to go over time, but I did see a question coming in, but unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to skip the question. I'm sorry, but thank you all for joining the LinkedIn Live. Appreciate you all coming in. Make sure if you're looking to join the Esports Trade Association Education Committee, please click the link. I think it was just, yeah, it looks like it was just sent in the chat and everything. But yeah, thank you all for your time. Appreciate you stopping by. Danielle, Nik, do you all have any final comments or anything?
No,
Oh,
thanks for
also,
having us. Yeah.
I was gonna also say like Esports Next as well. I saw that
Mhm.
Esports Next is now going to be with DreamHack Dallas. So if you want to go there and go to DreamHack Dallas, also go to that as well.
Early
So,
bird tickets
sorry, there you
available.
go, Nik.
Yeah, early bird tickets available for that one as well. But yeah, no, thanks for having us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Absolutely same. It's wonderful to be able to talk about all this stuff with you guys and our audience.
Well, all right. Well, thank you very much, and hope everyone has a good day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.